Basu and Godin Notebook. 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 Basu and Godin.
Well, if you got a new microphone, it means that it's a new season. Arpin, welcome everybody to the Basu and Godin Notebook. I am Marc-Antoine Godin with Arpin Basu. Arpin, we got a big show today.
I think we should call this a breaking news pod because yes, I did get a microphone after so many comments seen on YouTube. These blue headphones are not my microphone anymore. I'm an actual podcaster with an actual mic.
Incredible.
Breaking news, everyone. But yes, we do have a big show. There's a lot going on. And we have an excellent guest coming up on this show a little later. We had a chance to sit down with Pascal Vincent for a very interesting, about a half-hour conversation that I found very interesting, and got to ask some questions that we don't usually get to ask in a normal setting. So that's coming up later. But first and foremost, we obviously have to talk about a certain guy who grew up loving the Canadiens and who was confronted with questions about his future in Pittsburgh and at the Las Vegas Player Media Tour, and that's Sidney Crosby, who did not deny any. He didn't shut down any of the talk. He had an opportunity to kill this story for at least a while, if not forever, by forcefully saying, "I have no intention of ever asking for a trade from the Pittsburgh Penguins. You should stop talking about this." And he did not do that. And so that obviously lit a match and threw it into a huge pit of gasoline. And Sidney Crosby went running off, laughing at the explosion, I'm sure, but the explosion is real. And the possibility, while still remote, seems real that this situation could eventually come to pass because Sidney Crosby did nothing to dispel that notion whatsoever.
No, and I think that, the fact that the Four Nations, when he mentioned, after the ovation in Montreal, how it was his childhood team, that it meant it was really special to receive an ovation in Montreal. Now, this week in the different quotes you might have read that he said that there were worse things than being linked to the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, the Canadiens are not the only team being involved in those rumors or those speculations, should I say. I'm not sure to which extent, though, it was him remaining polite or just trying to figure out or giving the chance to the Pittsburgh Penguins to figure some things out. And, there was his agent, Pat Brisson, was also quoted. I think that Pat's words were probably more significance or had more weight than Sid's actually, and maybe that Pat was sending the message to the Pittsburgh Penguins like, hey, either you move him or you find a way to be competitive again. But I look at that and I'm thinking, well, Sid not too long ago signed a new contract, and it was obvious to everybody in which direction the Pittsburgh Penguins were going. So why would Sid be blind to this? I mean, it was rather obvious that they were heading for a rebuild. So it's just following this, the path that everybody expected. So it shouldn't come as a surprise now.
Well, I would say this. So I recently, in writing a piece on Carey Price, after he was traded, sort of a retrospective sort of piece, I was looking back through some of my coverage of him, trying to, get inspired for something. And I came across a story that I think explains how these guys think. You say everyone, everyone knew that the Pittsburgh Penguins were going down this path. Well, I think there were many times in Carey Price's career where everyone knew the Canadiens were going down a certain path and he didn't quite accept it. Why? Because he felt, he's the type of player that could change that. He's the type of player that can alter that path through his excellence. And, I go back to what he said. It's like at one point, he mentioned in a story. This is a story from the golf tournament in 2018. So, uh, this was the Canadians were sort of teetering a little bit. Mark Bergevin kind of was at the time refusing to use the word rebuild. Was because Price was there and Shea Weber was there. And so he said, Price was 31 at the time, so Crosby's 38, which is different. But he just said that day, I'm just going to continue to try and do my job and play my part. I feel like I'm in the prime of my career, and I feel I have the ability to help the team regardless of the state we're in. And I feel like maybe when Sidney Crosby signed that contract, he felt kind of the same way. Like if you guys do enough, go through whatever process you need to go through, but do it in a way that allows us to remain competitive, and I can get us over the top. I can make sure that if we have a reasonably competitive team, it becomes that much more competitive because I'm on it. And I think that that's the way these guys are wired, right? Reality, I don't know if it's set in yet, but clearly last season it started setting in. The comments he made, not regarding the Canadians or not regarding a potential trade, but just the reality of the Pittsburgh Penguins' current situation, makes it sound to me like this is something that's just more obvious to him than it might have been when he signed that contract. That maybe this is beyond what his excellence can fix. It's like it's so that's what I kind of got from that, because I thought the same way as you. When you sign that, when Sidney Crosby did not sign that contract thinking that he's gonna shepherd the Penguins through a rebuild for 3 years and then go off into the sunset once the Penguins have missed the playoffs 3 years in a row. He expected to play in the playoffs again for the Pit. Maybe it probably would have been unreasonable for him to think that he was going to win another Stanley Cup in a Pittsburgh Penguins uniform. But I don't think it's entirely unreasonable at the time for him to think like maybe this team can get back in the playoffs and we get to at least play that kind of hockey again. And I guess the other thing about it would be that I'm not entirely sure this is going to be Sidney Crosby's last contract.
No. Me neither.
He'll be 40 when it expires, if I'm not mistaken. I could see him signing another 1-year deal or 2 more 1-year deals for that matter.
Yeah.
And still being a highly effective NHL player, not obviously an elite one, but a very, very good one. So I think there's a lot of balls in play here. And if he thinks that, then it would also be like, okay, well, this contract is not the deadline for this to happen. I'll have other shots at it as long as we get competitive. So I think great players are wired the way that Carey Price quote came off, because he was facing what he saw in 2018 coming down the pipe. And, they had just drafted, I guess that was the Kotkaniemi draft. So they had just drafted 3rd overall. The Canadians were not in a good place. And Price thought that anyway. And so I think that's kind of that when I read that and then I saw what happened with Sid, I kind of thought that I made a parallel there that maybe this is what Crosby's mindset was. And maybe he's slowly coming to the realization that what he thought then probably won't apply over the next 2 years.
Well, if he ever comes to the decision, because it's entirely up to him to, ask for a move. The way I see it, I think that the Canadians are very nicely set up to make a competitive offer and to be an attractive destination for Sidney Crosby. If he's looking for a team who's on the upswing, a team where he could have a legitimate impact, but at the same time doesn't necessarily, it's not as if you take him out of the equation and the whole team crumbles. He would fit right in, and he would pretty much guarantee this team would be a playoff team from then on. There's still a bubble playoff team for this for now until the nucleus gets a little bit older. But you add Sidney Crosby to that group, and I think that the question's pretty much settled by then. So it all depends where he would want to go. And I'm not sure if I said this on this microphone before or not, but the way I see it, is that if Kyle Dubas was ever to come to Sidney Crosby and say, okay, fine, you want to go, where would you like to go? I feel like if the answer was one destination, I don't think they would be Montreal. If he was given a short list, and if Sid had, was providing the Penguins with a short list, then it becomes extremely interesting, because I could be wrong, but I would suspect that Montreal would be on that list. And if you have a short list of teams that are competitive each in their own way, you could most likely find more competitive teams than the Canadiens on that list. But if from that point on, if Kyle Dubas say, okay, I'm going to shop him around from that list, his job will be to say, where can I get the most out of a Sidney Crosby trade? If you have one potential trading partner, you won't get much. The more partners possible you have, the more you can get for a certain player. But if it's 4-5 teams, I think that the Canadiens would be in a great spot to be attractive as a destination and still be also the team that would provide the Penguins with the best return for their purpose, the purpose of a rebuild. So that's why I think, because you look at, let's say, Colorado, in terms of draft picks, in terms of prospects, the cupboards are bare. And you go down the top teams that are ready to win now, it's the same thing. But is the criteria to win now? Is it the criteria to say, at least I want to play in the playoffs?
Well, I think, I just wrote about this on The Athletic. It just ran today. But I agree with you. But I think the reason why Montreal is more likely to be one of the teams, or if not the team, I don't know if it would be the team, but I firmly believe that if Sidney Crosby were ever to decide that, okay, for my best interests and for the organization's best interests, I think it's time to go, he himself would go through the process of being like, which team is best fits both criteria, where my best interests are served and the Penguins' best interests are served. Where can I find the marriage where I don't leave the Penguins scratching and trying to mine gold out of a coal mine kind of thing, while also getting the chance to win? I want both.
Mm-hmm.
And once he does that, because I can assure you, he would do that analysis on his own. He doesn't need to read my story or anyone else's story. This is a man who is acutely aware of everything that is going on in the NHL and knows exactly which teams would be positioned to provide him with both things. And if he came up with a list of teams that provided him both things, that served his own purposes and the Penguins' purposes, there's frankly no team in the league that I can think of that is better positioned to do that than Montreal. Now that's talking today, September 12th. That at this moment, that applies. Now, who knows? The season starts, maybe Ottawa gets off to a super hot start and starts looking like some team that is better than we consider them to be at the moment, or Detroit, or like Anaheim, or who knows? Like, who knows? There could be other contenders that sort of would be able to, and I don't even know if Ottawa would really fit that second criteria, but some like Anaheim, teams that have similarly are trying to emerge out of a rebuild. If they show that they've taken a step, maybe they come into the running. But as of right this moment, like Corey Pronman just did his pipeline rankings. We talked about it on an earlier episode. The top 11 teams on that ranking missed the playoffs last year, except for one, the Canadiens, who were fifth. All of the contending teams that Sidney Crosby might consider give him the best chance of winning: Dallas, Toronto, Tampa, Florida, Colorado. All these teams are in the bottom third of that ranking, which is normal. You trade draft picks away, you trade prospects away to get better. Right now, you're trying to win the Stanley Cup. So in terms of that marriage, I have not spoken to Sidney Crosby about this, but I feel I have a pretty good sense of what he's like, or what he considers important. And I think giving the Penguins the best opportunity to make the most out of a trade for Sidney Crosby would be one of the important criteria on his own list of priorities. And if that's the case, I don't know if he said trade me to this team, he might very well say the Canadiens, because he will have done that analysis on his own and figured out that this is actually the best way for both those criteria to be satisfied. I mean, like, if he doesn't really care what happens to the Penguins, or if he doesn't really care about the return, then that changes everything. Then for sure the Canadiens are not top of the list. For sure the Canadiens are not the only team he would mention. That would be probably Colorado. But I just don't believe that that's going to be the case. I just couldn't imagine him disregarding what the Penguins get out of it, and not having some kind of desire as his last act as a Pittsburgh Penguin to help them get through this rebuild and get to the other side of it.